And we're live. Hello, my name is Kimberly Stewart Lucas of Warrior Mamas and Absolutely Divine Events. And this is another episode of Dish with the Doulas. Thank you so much for watching. So this episode is about a topic that we've spoken about in previous episodes many times, but I've never dedicated a full episode to this topic, and it's about time that I did. So today we are joined by Dr. Ayanna Robinson. She is the president and the founder of Black Girls Breastfeeding Club. Dr. Robinson, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you coming on Dish with the Doulas. Normally when I start my shows, these episodes, I talk about an existing connection that we have or how I know about you. And I'll start with what prior to what I learned today, right? So I actually learned about the Black Girls Breastfeeding Club because you all are kindred partners with Black Mamas Matter Alliance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so a lot of my wish list, so season 1 I did last year was really a snapshot of my life, of people that were involved with my birth stories. I have 3 children. And so this season, I wanted to highlight organizations and resources and practitioners who are in alignment with Black women and Black women's reproductive health and justice. And so actually, it was the list of partners from Black Mamas Matter Alliance, because I became familiar with them with Black Maternal Health Week last year. And that gave me a plethora of names and resources. And so Black Girls Breastfeeding Club has been on my wish list since February, really last year. But when I made my actual list, you all were on there. And then COVID-19 happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I had to produce from home. And that's why every episode looks different, because I'm not techie. And so you were mentioned in the first episode that I did back in March. And I found my way to emailing you and inviting you on, and we were able to work our schedules out. And then today I find out that I know your sister, and I've known her for many years.
Small world.
A very small world, very small world. And actually, your sister, we've been a part of workshops that I really mark as part of my, like, the beginnings of my birth work, right? And doing things with me. So the connection here, even though this is the first time we've laid eyes on each other, there still is a connection.
Yes.
Because there are probably 2 degrees of separation in this city of who knows who. So you just never know, right?
Exactly. I love it.
So I want to, and I'm learning today because, like I said, it's our first time meeting. I'd like to know what experiences led you to found and create the Black Girls Breastfeeding Club.
Mm-hmm. I can take this all the way back to my own journey into motherhood. So I knew that coming into motherhood that I was going to breastfeed. I've always been really passionate about health and about nutrition. So when my daughter was born, I knew all the statistics and the recommendations for breastfeeding. So it was like, okay, I'm going to breastfeed. It's going to be exclusive for 6 months. After I introduce solids, we're going to keep breastfeeding. And we're going to go for at least a year. And so I knew that going in. I started grad school as a public health student when my daughter was 9 months. And during that time, I began to dig into the literature a little bit more. And I learned about the disparities that exist with African-American mothers, particularly in breastfeeding in the US. I learned about the disparities while also continuing to learn that we bear the burden of the diseases that breastfeeding protects against. Yeah. And so while I was in school, I focused my master's thesis research on breastfeeding and was awarded a mini grant with some of my close friends and colleagues from Morehouse School of Medicine, in which we went into a community college in Atlanta that was focusing on expectant mothers who were also working towards their GEDs. And we developed and implemented a breastfeeding education program. Even at that time, like, I was already really interested in exploring like the historical and cultural factors that were contributing to the breastfeeding disparities that we see amongst Black women. And so in our first sessions with that program, we talked about, wet nursing and the historical legacy that has had and how that has impacted breastfeeding rates. We talked about formula marketing and the introduction of formula to our communities. We talked about these stereotypes that have been introduced to Black women, hypersexuality or being hypersexualized. And so we talked about all those things in addition to talking about breastfeeding benefits for mother and baby. We had a lactation consultant who came in with the how-tos. And then again, wanting to share and connect mothers to other mothers who have been along that journey. We had a panel in which we brought in other young mothers to say, like, this is how this experience was for me. This is how I transitioned back to school or work. And so that was like my first experiment. And I would like to think like a precursor to Black Girls Breastfeeding Club. And so fast forward to grad school, I went back to school to work on my PhD, and I was still very much into breastfeeding research. And I began at that point to really look into norms a bit more and really learning about how norms impact our decisions. And so with my own space that I occupy as a researcher, I knew I wanted to be able to translate research into a culturally appropriate way to provide information and resources to mothers. And I also wanted to continue to positively impact the breastfeeding norms for Black mothers, for Black women in general. And so that's what Black Girls Breastfeeding Club was started to do. And that's what we aim to do.
Excellent. And so this sounds like your life's work. It's personal, it's academic, it's professional, it is what your passion is. And that, from what I've read and have learned, that's why I was so eager to talk to you, because this is not just something that you're researching from afar and researching subjects. This is something that you're a part of the community, of people that look like you and that are experiencing things like you. So you talked about, and I use this hashtag a lot. So for me, again, I've never done an episode strictly on breastfeeding, and I'm wondering why I haven't, but I'm glad that I am now. Mother of three for myself. My oldest is 16. I got a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old. And the time frames that I breastfed, let's see, Solomon, he's the oldest, the first 2 years. Then Sarah was a year and a half. And then my youngest was a year. So for me, I look at that trend, right?
Yeah.
And I did on demand. I didn't have a schedule. It was like I poured myself into it. It was when they wanted. And I also knew that it was something that was not just for nursing and feeding. It was also about security. It was also about connection. It was our continued spiritual connection, And so I've always used the hashtag breast is best. Can you share why breastfeeding is best? You mind sharing some information about that?
Yes, of course. And so through decades and years of research, it really shows, and we know at this point that breast milk is the optimal source of nutrition for babies. Not only is the optimal source of nutrition, it is the perfectly tailored food for babies, for infants and for babies. It changes over time to meet their nutritional and developmental needs. And it also, in addition to the nutritional benefits, has so many other benefits as far as positively impacting and boosting the immune systems for babies. So we know that the specific components of breast milk includes things like A and B lymphocytes, our white blood cells, and other components that specifically add to this confer of immunological benefits from breast milk to babies. All of those benefits lead to decreases in illness and sickness that are reported among breastfed infants. There are a list of benefits for babies and also from mothers, everything that ranges from decreased risk of sudden infant death syndrome to decreased risk of childhood obesity, childhood leukemia, gastrointestinal infections, ear infections. For mothers, we see protection against diabetes, protection against certain types of cancers, breast cancers, ovarian cancers, protection against heart disease. Like the list goes on and on as far as the benefits that extend well beyond that period of breastfeeding.
Yes, yes. I know for me, I'm part of a community. I'm just grateful. And like I said, I include your sister in this. I'm part of a community of moms and women where natural and home birth is not taboo. It's very commonplace. And I have to remind myself that a lot of people, it is still awkward, or like that's an alternative, or that's an option,
Yep.
And breastfeeding is something that was normalized for me.
Yep.
Probably back when I was a little girl, I always credit my cousin Gail, who's in Ohio, and we used to have family reunions. And Gail, we would be out in the patio, and she wore really stylish crop tops and things, and would just nurse right there in the patio in front of everybody. And I was like, okay, like the first couple of times, probably at a 5-6-year-old, it was like, oh, what's happening? But every summer I would go up there, and she had to feed her child, and she's not going to go somewhere else because we're all family. So this is what you do. And I've told her that as an adult, like, you normalized it for me. You didn't make it something to be ashamed of, or to have to go to another room, or have to cover up everything and smother your child.
Exactly.
It's something that you do. And if people don't like it, they can get up and go.
Exactly.
So it is something that, I'm glad that I was brought up and then continue to be part of a community where this is what we do. This is where, how we nurse and so forth. You spoke about something earlier about the hypersexualization of things, right? And how people relate breastfeeding to being something. I've heard all kinds of things. I'm sure you have too, in the stuff you've done, about it being something nasty. I'm crossing wires here. So I'm an event planner, and there's another event that I do called the Reclamation Project, and it's a celebration of Black women's sexuality. And there was an artist, Keith Cross, who did a piece that focused on the breast, and he talked about that he wanted to focus there because, his mom and grandma, it wasn't something that you did. Could you speak about people's opinions and how to counterbalance that to let people know, like, this, breasts have their different things that we use our breasts for, but can you speak to that?
Certainly. So that is a barrier that continues to exist in our community. And, I like to say we didn't introduce these narratives. Like, those are narratives that have been introduced when our ancestors were enslaved and beyond that, and that have been perpetuated over time into present day. We don't see honest representation of Black women through the media. And so if you are constantly combated with images that present your body as solely something sexual, then it is hard to even think that you could use your breast for something other than something sexual, something functional to actually feed your baby. Like, that's a hard switch to make. And that's why it's so important that we continue to challenge these narratives and that we provide our own counter narratives. Hashtag, like you see all the time, is representation matters. And it's because our norms are in part established by what we see. We buy products and support different things because of how they're pushed to us in the media. Our health behaviors also have the same factors. They're influenced in part by societal norms. So what we see in the media, if I'm not seeing positive representations of Black women and Black motherhood and Black women breastfeeding, then how do I internalize that? If I don't have communities as a result of some of these other factors where breastfeeding is viewed as something that is a cultural norm, then it is also a challenge for me to see myself breastfeeding. In the research that I conducted with Black women who were in support groups on Facebook, I'll never forget, there was one mother who was breastfeeding twins beyond 6 months exclusively at this point. And she said, I have been around Black women like my whole life, predominantly Black people, and I have never seen another woman breastfeed. And so to get, and she's referring to her Facebook group, she said to get in this community and to see 26,000 women, and they're all Black, and they're all mothers, and they're all breastfeeding, like that blew my mind. And so to hear her say that really speaks to the power of us sharing our own narratives, like you see across social media, and just reinforcing and underscoring the importance of continuing to share those images. And like you mentioned, also with family. So when we're normalizing breastfeeding, we know, especially with Black women, that the father and the maternal grandmother, those are highly influential persons in terms of how long a mother decides to breastfeed in her infant or her infant feeding choices in general. So the more we can include the fathers, include the mothers in that breastfeeding support group, those breastfeeding education sessions, the more we can make sure that Black women are seeing and connected to other Black women who are breastfeeding, like we're going to continue to challenge those norms and those narratives.
Yes. Well, I know I normalize it for many of my friends, because I think there was one time that I actually left where I was to go somewhere else to nurse. But I will say this, the saving grace. So we went to this really swanky restaurant. I think it was in Clearwater, Florida, or somewhere like that. We were celebrating a friend's wedding. And I had on a sundress. Now, this was the kind of restaurant where I think you had to wear jackets. The men had to wear blazers. So it was like that kind of place. And they had like their own wine cellar in the basement. And it was just really swanky, right? And I had my son at the time, I think he was like maybe 3 or 4, and then a 10-month-old baby.
Yeah.
Who was like, when she was ready to nurse, she was ready to nurse. Okay. She's the Aries. She's the Aries in my life. And she is I am, and she is fire, always has been. And so I wasn't thinking about, the nursing and what I had on and how exposed I would be, because I just didn't think like that,
Exactly.
And so, but if I would have done that at the table, a lot would have been showing. And I had a feeling that because of the dress code and so forth, that I would have been asked I just said, before we even get into this, I felt, I don't say a walk of shame, but I was going to the restroom. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I cannot believe I'm doing this. The saving grace was that was the nicest bathroom I have ever been in my life, where each stall had a swivel toilet top.
Oh, wow. Fancy.
And it was cool inside. Like it was your own like suite inside of the bathroom in your private. So all the time to do that, it was like, okay, my ancestors and my creator are looking out for me, because I felt really bad about taking my baby to the bathroom.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, like I said, it was laid out and it was a very comfortable environment to do it. But I said, it's the last time I'm going to do this. And I actually have a picture with my son, my daughter, and my friend, Nikki, that I can see it on my face. I can see the relief, but the concern, like, I can't believe on my face. And I treasure that picture, because it's like, okay, that was the last time, because we don't take our plates to the bathroom to eat.
Exactly.
So why should we take our children to a restroom for them to eat?
Exactly. Yeah. And when we ask women to do that, we're just further saying that this is something that is shameful. It's not something that's normal. It's something that should be done in private. And I mean, I had that experience as well, like early on. Still being comfortable. I can remember my daughter being like a month old or a few months old, and I'm at the mall and I'm like, okay, I should go into the bathroom. And then after a while, I'm just like, I'm not going to go into the bathroom. And for me, I was 22 years old. And so not a lot of my friends had children at that time. But I had one friend who our children are just like 10 days apart. And she became like my anchor, like my support in breastfeeding. And so I look back at that years later and just realize again, like how important it is to be connected to other mothers where you are along motherhood, where you're along your breastfeeding journey, because they reinforce that normalization to you as well.
Exactly. I'm going to actually bring in a comment because this was on my mind. So Egyptian actually in Facebook, and I want to thank everyone that is watching in Facebook. Again, we're about a 10-second delay, so we do see your comments. Egyptian, I was thinking about this. Nursing was seen as a poor people thing.
Mm-hmm.
That we were talking about the benefits of breastfeeding, and also the other side of that, I always thought it was something economical, right?
Yeah.
I don't know nothing about formula. I don't think I've ever purchased formula. I think, my son wasn't a planned home birth. We had all 3 children at home, but my son was not planned home. So I had him at home. We went to the hospital, and then that's where I did my 2 days, and then came home. And so they give you those bags with the formula. And I was like, throw that crap out,
Right.
So that was the only time formula was in my possession. But can you speak to even the thoughts about, well, poor people do that?
So that's another view that is pervasive in different parts of our community. So when formula was introduced, it was introduced as this a way of feeding that said that you were wealthy, that you had this certain social status. And so I'm blanking on the researcher, but she talks about how through waves of feminism and women began to adopt breastfeeding more, that African American women lagged behind in that acceptance of breastfeeding. We also know that we've been disproportionately marketed for formula. And so those views are still, like I said, they're still pervasive in many parts of our community. We just have to continue to challenge that. We have to continue to challenge that formula is something that, it's not something that Black women do. It's something that white women do. We have to challenge that. We have to continue to push messages about the importance of breastfeeding, and that, look, this is something that Black women have been doing since the beginning of time. This is since the beginning of time. And this switch is just a small portion of a reflection of our history, and literally like marketing tactics, lack of support, and lack of resources that have been diverted and invested into our communities.
Yes. Also, and I started to say something, this is what I do a lot of times. I'll start to say something and I'll go down another road. When I was talking about the community of women I'm around, I wanted to mention what my community, I'm thinking about my midwife, Tolewa, my sister Rajaniya, who I'm sure you know Rajaniya. Do you know Rajaniya? Who were instrumental, like in my second and third births. Really, Rajaniya was also instrumental in my first birth. But they also told me, because I know that when you breastfeed, it helps to contract your uterus.
Uterus, exactly.
Not back to normal size, but it helps to contract it, to the size that it's going to be after having a baby.
Exactly.
And, how healthy it is for the mother. So all the benefits there are for the baby, the benefits there are there for the mother as well. But I'm so grateful for my community, because after having 3 children, I was told and kind of given a heads up that it becomes a little bit more intense at that 3rd baby. I don't know what it is about the 3rd one. Maybe decided that it gets to, and that has to contract a little more. But I'm so grateful because, again, like you said, the support. If I was not told that by 2 women who had 3 or more children, I know and I love and I trust that, hey, the breastfeeding will be a little bit more intense, but you have to ride the wave and know that it's purposeful. If I wasn't told that, I may have stopped. So having that knowledge from wise women in your circle, it is invaluable. And I now pass on that information to sisters. And this stuff is not to scare or not to, because they're truths about the truths about the truth. And so many people have experienced it, that of course it's not everyone's truth, and some people don't experience any kind of different sensation at all. But just to have that knowledge that about the 3rd baby, it may feel a little different. And I use the word sensations. I don't, because pain to me is relative. So I use the word sensation. Someone said that's cute. I use the word sensations because everyone's definition, when they hear it, I don't know where they're coming from. So I like to use another word to kind of, to reframe it. But you're right. That community is so important. And you spoke about the Facebook group, and I know you've done research on that. what have you found, with social media and things like Facebook to help normalize breastfeeding with Black women? Can you speak to your study?
Yes. So it was, I can just say, incredibly humbling to be able to be in these groups, because they really are protected and sacred spaces for Black women to share their breastfeeding experiences, share other experiences. And so I've just felt incredibly honored to be able to share their stories through research, and to also do some quantitative analysis where I can actually look at how the support that they receive in these groups is correlating to how long they intend to breastfeed. So I'll say that I did, or I conducted surveys, and I also conducted focus groups, which really allowed me to get some really rich information about their experiences. And the women, I think, as I mentioned, described how being in these groups and seeing other women breastfeed, seeing their pictures, seeing their stories had a few effects. One, it helped them to normalize breastfeeding. So even if they came into the group pro breastfeeding, they were still saying that when they saw other women breastfeeding for 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, that they were like, wow, some of the women extended how long they planned to breastfeed and how long they ended up breastfeeding because of seeing women in the group to do that. It also reinforced breastfeeding in public. So some women reported that when they saw other Black women breastfeeding in public, that allowed them to feel more empowered. One participant, she said, I've always been nervous about breastfeeding in public. And then I put up these pictures. She was like, I see these, bad mothers like in here breastfeeding. And I did it. And I had to go and report back to the group because she was nervous prior to seeing all of the other women who were breastfeeding openly in public. So it really shows, I think, just the power of, again, normalizing breastfeeding within our communities and also providing support. There were mothers who said that they went to other communities that weren't specifically dedicated to Black women, and it just didn't feel the same, that they specifically sought out groups that were geared towards Black women because they wanted not only to share an experience of motherhood, but they wanted to share the experience of other Black women in motherhood. And I thought that was important as well. They talked about, as I frame my research in Black feminist thought, so they talked about how it provided that counter narrative. They talked about like how they were inspired in their own breastfeeding activism to encourage other Black women to breastfeed. So there were a lot of positive outcomes that I found.
Yes. And I put some comments up here. Look, I love my StreamYard, I'm telling y'all, and I love to be able to to interact with those that are watching us, and we see your comments. They come in about 10 seconds later. But yes, breast is best. We saw one sister saying that she nursed for 2 years. I love it. And that almost 3 years. And that's what I love. This culture, look, I don't want to get started. A whole nother show about what this culture says we should be doing, or society, and say that much, of how many years and when you should stop. I think for the words I would get were when they can start eating solids, I'm like, wait a minute.
Right.
Because the solids aren't always the best thing anyway, right? So you're taking this healthy that actually changes as the child develops. What food can you find that actually changes from when they are infants to 3 months to 6 months to 9 months? And it's one vessel.
Exactly. It's amazing. It is amazing.
You're not going to see it. Enslaved. Let's look at this one. Enslaved Black women nursed the master's children on the plantation. Woo.
Sure.
Now I'm going down. Like I know this is a free forum. This and right here. Part of that.
Right That's important. That the wet nursing experience, that is a part of the legacy. For generations of Black women disapproving breastfeeding because of those experiences, not even allowed to breastfeed their own children, but being forced to breastfeed other children.
Yes. And what that does psychologically to a family.
Yes.
Where you're nursing another child that's not yours,
Right.
but you're not able to nurse your child. And I can't even imagine what that does to the dynamic of mother and children in itself. Like I just, it now
Exactly.
did you studies at Emory by chance? Did you
University of Georgia.
University of Georgia? Because I'm thinking of a sister. Her name is Kim, and I think she did research on. I think her focus was on Mammy. I'm not sure if you know about this. Oh, and I wish I had the actual source because it's like coming to me right now. And this was part of that. I think her study was not just who Mammy was and who, but this is what one of the things that she had to do and how that affected her dynamic and relationship with her family, This stuff goes way back, y'all.
Yes.
And was designed just again thinking that these things come from us, and we're again supposed to look outward. That is not the way in which it was designed to be. It was not the way it was designed to be. Can you speak to other resources? So I know on your site, which is, let me pull up the website for those that do not know right here, blackgirlsbreastfeedingclub.com. You all have a directory, correct?
Yes.
On your site? Okay. So it's different. How is it organized? When people want to find more information for support, where they are?
Yes. So the directory provides support groups that are specifically designed for Black mothers. And it is support groups that we found across the U.S. and we continue to update that directory. I actually have a few who contacted me in the past few weeks to add their names to the list because mothers should know that there are so many resources for support. There are organizations and support groups that are dedicated to supporting Black mothers. Like in Atlanta, we have Reaching Our Sisters Everywhere, Rose, who has community trainer or transformer programs where they are training mothers to become peer educators and start their own groups. In addition to, Rose just does so much for the breastfeeding community. And that's just
right now. Look, I was going to share the screen. I'm going to go to it right now. How about that?
Yeah.
Now it's going to have the statistics what I was talking about before, but I'm going to hop over to the other page real quick so we can see. There is us. And let me go here. This is the site, and you've got resources here, and there's your support group under resources. Let's go there. And it's going to open up PDF. How about that? I forgot about that. So let's get that in. Let's see. Can you see the PDF?
Yes.
Okay. So I know and you're here in Atlanta as well. So for Georgia, let's go back to here. You've got Rose. Oh, let me go and share that one. It's still showing the support groups, not showing that one. Let me stop that one. And I'm learning, y'all. I'm learning. Share screen. I'm going to let this. There we go. There it is. All right. Now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So we've got, you're talking about Rose here, and this is, and a lot of my viewers are all over, but a lot are based here in Georgia. You're talking about Rose, and then we've got Milk and Honey.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And you said you're going to be adding more onto this list?
Yes, we're adding more. We'll continue to update the list because we want to provide a directory. Like this is designed to be a directory where mothers can come in and see somewhere in their state. And the good thing about the list now, we have online groups such as the Breastfeeding Support Group for Black Moms, but a lot of these groups are offering virtual support groups as well. So it may be a little easier. Like if there isn't a support group that's in your state, then you can look to perhaps join one of the other support groups that's offering those virtual support groups now.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I love it. I love it. So yes, and that's on blackgirlsbreastfeedingclub.com for more information for the directory. And also people can follow you on Instagram. Well, I was looking for you on Facebook. I was like, should I have a Facebook page?
I know. I've been lagging.
I get it because Facebook is becoming something that, even though we're on Facebook now, so thank you for that platform, but it's a little different. Instagram is just, I don't know. It's just
Yes.
It's become a different place. My husband and I were talking about the day. It's become a very different place. You were speaking about things now. It's one thing else I want to talk about. Have you, during this time of the pandemic and COVID-19, have you seen a shift in perception about how people are looking at breastfeeding? Has that changed at all for people?
I can't say that outside of the community that I interact with, which is already very pro breastfeeding, that I have seen a shift. But I hope that in the midst of a pandemic, that people really understand the importance of breastfeeding in any type of disaster, emergency. Breastfeeding is the safest way to feed your infant. It is the safest way. And we know, at least there's no research to suggest that coronavirus is transferred through breast milk. National organizations, CDC, WHO, just released information about the studies that they've been conducting, finding that there is no live fragments of the virus through breast milk. And just really, yes, and just really reasserting that the benefits of breastfeeding nutritionally and also the virus prevention that we've been discussing, that far outweighs the risk of transmission to infants, which at this time is believed to be relatively low. So mothers, even if they're diagnosed with coronavirus, COVID-19, they can still breastfeed. And it's still very important when you think about, again, the risk of, or the decreased risk of viruses and the additional protection that breastfeeding provides for the immune system of the baby. And of course, CDC lists precautions for breastfeeding mothers if they are diagnosed with coronavirus. And so hygiene, as far as washing hands, if you are feeding the baby to the breast, wearing a face covering, but even mothers who are very ill and they're not able to physically feed infant to breast, they're recommending that mothers still hand express or pump the milk. And again, there are hygiene and guidelines for breastfeeding recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing all of that, because it seems like we are writing a new manual for everything, every part of our life. From the delivery room, a lot of people are, choosing home births, or really trying to find themselves information if they're doing it in a hospital, to breastfeeding. And so, I was curious to know, like, has there been a shift? But you're right, like, breast continues to be best, even in a pandemic.
Definitely.
Nothing's changed. Are there any, so what's next for Black Girls Breastfeeding Club? You said you're adding more resources to your directory. Are you all having any upcoming events or online events, or is there anything that you're releasing soon?
We are preparing for National Breastfeeding Awareness Month and also Black Breastfeeding Week, of course. I'm thinking around self-care, especially during this time, and helping mothers to be centered in self-care. And what does that look like for breastfeeding mothers, are women who are preparing to become mothers. And so that's along the lines of the event that I'm planning. And there'll be more details.
What is those, what you just talked about? Can you give me the dates on those, as far as that time frame, the month and the weeks?
So the Black Breastfeeding Week is the last week in August. And so we don't have a date yet, but it'll be during Black Breastfeeding Week. And so
it's
the best
August.
Exactly. There'll be updates on Instagram, of course, and then also on our website for more details. I'm constantly thinking of new resources that will be helpful for mothers, Black mothers who are breastfeeding. So that's in the works as well.
Excellent. Well, is there anything that you would like to share with the audience? Any call to actions that you want people to do, or to pay attention to, or to follow? Anything you'd like to share with the audience?
I would love for the audience to follow us on Instagram at Black Girls Breastfeeding Club, and also just continue to stay connected. You can visit the website, blackgirlsbreastfeedingclub.com. You can subscribe to our email list, and that way you're always in the know as far as new developments and events that we're hosting.
Excellent. And I want to acknowledge the sisters that are here watching. I see that you've got someone that you went to school with here.
Yes,
Did you all
Kristen.
support each other in wellness?
That was my sister who I was mentioning. That was my peer support when I was.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for watching. And also, this is a good one. That teeth means you should stop. Wrong.
Definitely. Not at all indication.
The things that we hear from other people, you know, and these are, like you said, people that are in our support system that we lean on for either advice, you know, or just to like talk to. And, you know, some of these messages go really deep and can really change your decisions to do something else. Intuition and that voice that you hear is the best way to go.
Sure is.
And then, like you said, surrounding yourself around a community of women, especially that are doing something that you are seeking to do.
Yes.
That's who you need to be around. And you know, Facebook groups, support groups that are in your hometown or in your state are so important. So important.
Building that supportive environment is key.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much for being on this. This has been a treat. I have a feeling that there's going to be more to talk about because I have different ideas. And I, you know, as an event planner, I am relegated to this right here. Yeah. So I'm always coming up with different ways to bring people together and to share resources, information, particularly for us, because we are who we got.
Exactly.
And we are enough.
Yes,
you know, to do the support and what we need. And so we are all different wealths of knowledge, and we need to come together to support, you know, each other that are doing the work and those new moms that are coming in, because babies are being born every day.
Yes.
And, you know, even new moms or new moms that have 2 or 3, it's still a new experience. Exactly. You know, and they need that support. And it's so important. And I'm grateful that there's an organization like yours to get information and information that has been well researched. Because this is what you do. And like I said, that's why I'm glad and grateful that you came on today, because I know that you're passionate about the work that you do. And this is, you know, you studied for this. This is what you've worked for. And also it applies to your life as well. Exactly. And that's divine. That's divine. So I am, the timing on that was interesting timing. We're still live. But I'm going to thank Dr. Ayanna Robinson. I'm not sure what happened on her end. Oh my. I'll bring her back in the stream if she comes back on. Islands in the stream. That's where we are. So again, for those that are watching live and also those that are watching, they're going to watch the replay. My name is Kimberly Stewart Lucas, and I'm the host of Dish with the Doulas. You can follow me on Warrior Mamas with an S. If you go the one with the without the S, that's my personal page, and you'll see other content there. But for the birth work that I do, Warrior Mamas on Instagram, and you're on Warrior Mamas right now on Facebook, and I appreciate you watching. If you have any other questions or comments, you can contact me or put it in the comments. I'll make sure it gets to Dr. Robinson. I think we lost her on the stream, but I am grateful that she joined us today for another episode of Dish with the Doulas. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.